Hi everybody, and welcome to Matthew's Movie Mentions for week 46. So this is movies up to the 19th of November. We have a lot of movies to get through, and it's quite exciting to be able to say this is the week that I did it. This is the week I hit 365 movies for 2018. So, of course, that means I'm going to stop and just roll over and stop watching movies forever now. No, if you think that, you don't know me at all. Stick around to the end. I'm going to talk about what's next for the rest of the year and some thoughts for next year. But for today, we are going to be talking about Christmas with the Kranks, They Shall Not Grow Old, The French Connection, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Midnight Cowboy, Smashed, Game Night, The Babadook, Dear White People, I Know That Voice, Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, Fargo, War on Everyone, The Zero Theorem, A Christmas Prince, Primer, 13th, When a Stranger Calls, and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Like I said, there are a lot of films to get through this week. Kicking off, Christmas with the Kranks is one of my favourite Christmas movies. It is not the best written, especially early on. It has a few rough things and some difficulties that makes it hard to buy into the premise. But it has a turn at 45 minutes that I always enjoy that makes the film a lot more fun. And then there's an ending that always leaves me with tears in my eyes. It is beautifully done and so well executed. We are covering this one on Pop Culturally Deprived, so that episode will be out in a couple of weeks. You'll be able to hear my thoughts and some good discussion about that film then. They Shall Not Grow Old. I have seen some questions about whether this should have been done, whether you should change footage in this way. I am firmly of the opinion that it is good to do it. I think it has helped push the understanding of the realities of war more into focus this year than I've perhaps ever seen. I'm on the fence a bit. If I'm honest, I am on the fence whether they should have added sound back in. There's a slight air of it being a Monty Python performance when it's got sound moments, but I can also understand them doing it if you're going that far. The film itself is hard, but it is gripping, and they don't pull back from any elements of the war. The French Connection is one that's been on the list pretty much all year, so I finally got round to watching it. There was a lot in this that I can see how it becomes a template for future films. So if you took this film and instead of two gritty, hard leads, you had two incredibly charming, quite funny leads, and you put in some more action, this basically becomes Bad Boys. So it really is a progenitor of popular modern films. The chase sequence in the middle is as good as I heard. It was better, in fact. There were interesting techniques in there that I don't think I've seen copied anywhere else. So yeah, I really enjoyed The French Connection. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is the final film we're doing for Pop Culturally Deprived's November Disney month. It's not a good one, if I'm honest. The film isn't really fun, the songs are pretty poor, and over time the film has become more casually racist, so I think it will be viewed even less as time goes on. Midnight Cowboy is another Oscar winner that I've wanted to watch. The story doesn't really have huge amount of point or growth throughout it, but it is a really interesting insight into a different life at the time, these two lowlifes and what they go through. The ending is much different than I expected, but up until the point they get on a coach, it could have been another film like Taxi Driver or King of Comedy, sort of a look at someone who's slightly outside of societal norms. Smashed, I was watching because it's Octavia Spencer, and her being in Alcoholics Anonymous and helping other people was basically my introduction to her on the sitcom Mom. She is even better in this. So the performances all round are really great, and it's a very well written film. I'm not sure I liked the ending. I think it's a little too open. But it is a very brave film. It looks at all the viewpoints of alcohol abuse and how it affects relationships and what it can do to people, even when they appear to be cured, in inverted commas, the struggles that they still have in their lives. Game Night was the perfect film for us to watch on a Friday night after a very long week. It is fun. It doesn't have a huge amount of depth. The ending is a little irritating. I think I compare this a lot to Keeping Up with the Joneses. It's perhaps more fun than that, a little bit less obvious, but Keeping Up with the Joneses does have John Hamm and Isla Fisher, both of whom I love in anything. The Babadook, I didn't have time to watch before Halloween, but I think it helps not putting this in as a scary movie in Halloween movies. It is a terrific horror, scary film. But there is so much to it that allows a lot more discussion than the normal Halloween, Friday the 13th type films. The core story is really well done. The performance of the child in this is just extraordinary. The actual horror, it's fascinating because it could be about parental pressure, it could be about mental illness, it could be about grief, it could be about actual monsters and things that go bump in the night. So yeah, really, really enjoyed The Babadook. I think I would recommend that to anyone who enjoys a gripping thriller. Dear White People is still working through Tessa Thompson's back catalogue, and this is kind of the big one. This was her big starring, lead role. Every story in this is well done. They set us up to know what's coming from a very early point, and that's excellent because it allows you to see all the poor decisions throughout the film leading up to the party, which really helps sort of add, oh, that's a bad decision, and then when you combine them, it's even worse. The pacing suffered a little bit in the middle for me. I think they set up too much. We kind of already had the point, but they laboured that point a little bit. But I'm looking forward to watching the Netflix series based on this. I think it might be really good with a bit more time to tell the story. But this was excellent. This was one definitely worth watching out for. I Know That Voice is a documentary that I've been looking forward to for a very long time now, and it is a lot of fun. It's a little light on detail at times. I would appreciate a bit more about the technical elements of filming, some of the thoughts about when people are in the studio and how they deal with it, both when they're recording, when they're the people doing the recording, how the directors work. But there is a huge range of interviewees in this. There are a lot of people talking, so it makes it really quite well-rounded with lots of insight and views, and like I said at the beginning, it is a lot of fun. 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri is gripping throughout. The details are drip-fed as you go through, and you sort of discover people's relationships, people's histories, more details about everything. They end up being incredibly revelatory as you go through, and it sort of changes the colour of what you're watching. And I think the turns that then get introduced are really quite unexpected and very original for a film of this type. The ending, I think, will divide opinion. My mum said she really didn't like it, whereas I really did. It felt like it reframed the movie earlier, but I can also see it being, oh, no, give me an actual ending. We then went on to watch Fargo, so we felt we had to, another Frances McDormand Oscar winner. For me, it's one of the best films I've ever seen, best made films, certainly. I love most scenes. The scenes of conflict are 2 people against 1, and they have these sort of archetypes all the way through. It's really interesting. But of course, Marge is a fascinating character. It takes her so long to be introduced, and then she's wonderful when she is. She's clearly so intelligent, so capable and competent, but she has softened herself and made it so that other people can be comfortable around her. And then you see those occasions where she needs to take control of a situation, she needs to show her intelligence for something, and she does it in different ways each time. It is wonderful, it's terrific writing, and it's amazing delivery as well. War on Everyone, more Tessa Thompson, but she's not in this a huge amount. I'd have enjoyed it more if the main characters hadn't been quite so despicable in the first 25 minutes. It made the rest of the film much harder to engage with, which is a shame because as a darker comedy, this would have been really good. It would have been a very nice story of these policemen's lives, but I just didn't like them from the off, basically. The Zero Theorem, I will admit, took me several attempts to watch and get through. I think now that I've watched several of his films this year, I can pretty much call it and say I'm not a fan of Terry Gilliam's style. It's too scattergun. It tries to do a lot of abstract, interesting, fun things within the core story, which I think actually distract from that story itself. And I'm not sure the story's necessarily that good anyway. A Christmas Prince, Netflix. It's really interesting to see Netflix doing this kind of Hallmark-style TV Christmas movie. At the same time, they're doing gripping dramas and trying to take on, big networks and cable companies. It was fairly fun. It really quite obvious. The ending is a little disappointing. I really wish the change at the end had been the king allowing the daughter to become queen rather than the ending we got. But it's comfy. It's a good when it's cold and you've got a warm drink sort of film. Primer was the 365th film that I've watched this year. I did keep this one for that point because it's a independent sci-fi film that I'd wanted to watch for a really long time. I just see this referenced in so many places. It is really good modern sci-fi. It unfolds so well. You think you're learning something and seeing something for the first time, and then it turns out, no, everything is in motion. We're just running to catch up, or we're in the point of view of a character who's being introduced, but actually this world has been going on for a while. So, there's a lot that really helped drive it forward by introducing those things. And there are facets in it. There's a thing with one of the minor characters' fathers that in another film would be a question that had to be resolved. But because of the nature of the science fiction, I'm trying not to give too much away, because of the nature of the science fiction, it gives it good depth that it doesn't need to resolve it. So, yeah, really clever. 13th is Ava DuVernay's exploration of the way racial injustice has morphed over the years in the US from slavery and the Civil War into the current problems and issues they suffer from within the country. It's an exceptionally well-told documentary. The fact that it goes from the Civil War to the modern elections to the issues that have been on the news very recently, it takes you through step by step to make sure everyone follows them on this journey and everyone understands the argument and the points they're making. They also interview people from the other side of the aisle, as it were. People who, I don't know a good way to describe it, but people who are the opposite of the point they're trying to make, but they include those to be a bit more even-handed, whilst also helping show that those views are dangerous to the people suffering from them. When a Stranger Calls was listed as a very early Tessa Thompson film, so I thought I'd give it a chance. She's in this film for about 50 seconds. The rest of it, it's interesting. I quite like the idea of taking the psycho caller trope, the girl home alone thing, and making it into a whole film. But I think this film is proof that actually it doesn't work as a whole film. The ending was really obvious. The scares had to be manufactured in some very cheap ways, and we weren't able to be given anything about the stalker because she wasn't really able to contact anyone, so there was no device there for giving her exposition. And Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, it's been on the list for a little while, and ultimately I'm a bit disappointed with it. The big moment for me was a subversion of the nerdy girl becoming beautiful trope, which is very good, but in this children's film, the children probably haven't seen the trope in the first place, so you're just reinforcing the trope effectively of you have to either hide your brains to be considered beautiful and cute, or you have to be intelligent, but that means you can't be a beautiful lady. It's problematic a little bit the way they do it. I think in a film more for adults, it would have been better received. The comedy I also found a bit lackluster. There wasn't anything that I really found that funny. And the characters were just a bit more ridiculous than even in the norms, so not much for me to grasp onto and enjoy. My recommendations this week, there were five films this week that had a 10 out of 10. So I'm going to recommend two of those. The first is They Shall Not Grow Old, which would be a really interesting way of presenting real stories from soldiers in World War I with footage on its own. But the fact they've then taken that footage, they've digitized it, upscaled it, colorized it, added sound, and just made it so much more impressive. This is going to be a film that is used for years to come in schools, on Remembrance Day. It's terrific and gripping. And 13th, the Ava DuVernay documentary, it is just striking. It demonstrates the problems that are affecting the USA, and it takes a very long look at the historical elements and how they built to this current situation. It then takes on the views of people who have caused some of the problems, caused some of this oppression and racist behaviour, and it dismantles those views by putting them in opposition of people who are legitimately suffering from it. And it does so without needing to vilify or comment on the people directly, which I for me is much, much stronger. It's incredibly well woven, it's powerfully told, and I think it makes everyone come out of it wanting to work towards equality and diversity. So I'm over 365, as you can tell. 368, I think, by the end of this. What I want to do now is try to get to 365 new films for the year. It means watching more than a film a day, at least every day. So it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of having films on in the background when I'm working, when I'm cooking, when I'm doing stuff. But I'm going to try and do that. 365 new films for the year. Probably not achievable, but also maybe just about achievable. So we'll see. And for next year, I've already started getting together some of the data to support what I want to do. Fewer films, but a better variety of films. You've probably noticed the last few weeks I've been trying to watch from actors and directors that I haven't necessarily seen some of their work, so I'm trying to get other voices in there. So I'm going to try to do a bit more of that next year. But next week, we will be back for week 47. We are going to 365 new films for 2018. See you then.